A friend of mine is a soldier in the Israeli army. He came back after 8 months, and he told me that the single most popular picture in terrorist homes, Hamas operative, were the picture of the Dome of the Rock, our holiest place in the world. And this got a conversation started that it's not because they think it's the holiest place, it's the third holiest place, but it's because them holding on to this place, despite our successes, is the biggest proof they have that God is on their side. And he says, in interviewing terrorists, they've said that the motivation behind these terrorist attacks were that God is on their side. And their proof, the Dome of the Rock. So I want to ask you a question. And this question is a difficult question, but it's a question that's I've been thinking about for many years, and I really didn't want to talk about it. But I think the time has come. So please take what I'm going to say lightly. Don't take it. It's simply an examination of some very deep personal questions. And once we understand this, in this video, I'm going to take a deep dive. We will have a much clearer understanding of what this place means and its significance to us vis-a-vis the Torah. And I want to take you even one step further. I want to tell you that in this video, we're going to deep dive into many sources, and we're going to discuss the principal question of why didn't God tell us about the location of the Temple Mount anywhere? Even Jerusalem is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses in the Torah. It's not mentioned. And even if you go into the way chronological, the way the Jews have after Deuteronomy comes Joshua. And then we comes Judges, and then comes 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. So I'm going to be focusing with you on 2 Samuel, where, as it says in Psalms 132, King David, he says, I'm not going to fall asleep. I'm not going to go back into my tent until I find the place. So why was it that God hid the location? And even more mysterious is if we look in Chronicles 21, the way God reveals, and also in 2 Samuel 24, the way God reveals to David the location of the Temple Mount was through a plague. So in this video, we're going to, and that what always bothered me. Why through a plague? Isn't there a prettier way of telling the Jewish people, this is why you were put into Egypt. This is why I took you out of Egypt. This is why I brought you to Mount Sinai. This is why I took you through the desert for 40 years. This is why you conquered Jericho. This is why you conquered the land for 7 years and divided for 7 years. This is why you lived 369 years. 369 years in Shiloh. That would be like from 1656 till today. And then you went, and the Philistines came and destroyed it. And all this time, the Jews don't know where the location is for the Holy Temple. And not only do they not know, they could seem to have completely forgotten. So if so far some of these questions are interesting to you, this might be a little longer than a normal video, but we're going to hit a lot of hot spots, a lot of good topics. At the end, I'm going to answer most of these questions, but I'm also going to answer something very interesting that we find that by Isaac was brought up. Abraham finds God in 1948 by the Jewish calendar. We're right now in the year 5,785. So if we count back to 1948, that's when Abraham was born. In 2048, that's when Isaac was born. And Abraham takes Isaac and he brings him to a place that God says is called where I'm going to see, what you're going to see. And they get to this place, and Abraham tries to do it. is unsuccessful. The angel stops him, and Abraham calls this place Hashem Yireh, God will see. And if we look in Rashi, Reb Solomon Isaacs, the foremost commentator on Talmud and of the Bible, says clearly that this is the place of where God will future build the temple. So it's very strange that Joshua didn't know where the temple was going to be built. And it's very strange that they build a temple in Shiloh for 369 years. So let's dive in. This week, in all synagogues around the world, we will read from Deuteronomy 12. And the parsha is called Re'eh, seeing. So I want to talk about seeing, because we see that by Isaac, Avram Avinu, Abraham calls the place, the Temple Mount, he calls it God sees, or seeing God. In Parshas Re'eh, in the portion that we read in Deuteronomy 12, it says the following words, L'shichnot tidrashu. And this means to seek out a place for resting, for God could rest, a place for the temple. And this is clearly a commandment telling us, look for a place. Now, Rashi says, this is David HaMelech, King David, that King David in Psalms 132, where he says, I will not let my eyes close. I will not sleep in a house. I will not go into my tent. I will not let rest fall upon me until I find the place. And this is a reference to Chronicles 1:21, Divrei Yomim Aleph, Perek Chaf Aleph, where we famously, this is actually where this term comes out every day, where before we do Tachanun, before we put our hand over our face and fall, like we do every day, for most every day, except for Saturdays, a few days of the happy days, we don't do this. And we say, Vayomer David El Gad. David says to God, Tzar li ma'od, I'm very upset. I'm very sorry. I'd rather fall in the hand of God than in the hand of mankind. So we're going to be examining that story. So let me give you just the quick brief. This is the story of after King David said, he's sitting, he's the Aron Habrit, the Ark of the Covenant, has been stolen from Shiloh. In the year 369, it's stolen by the Philistines. They take it for 7 months. Every month, they're having plagues. They take, very strange, they were having plagues of stomach problems. They were having mice. They took golden mice, put them on a caravan, put the covenant of the rock on it, took 2 oxen and sent it, and it comes to Beit Shemesh. That's actually where I live. People of Beit Shemesh didn't treat it properly, and 50,070 die. And then it's taken to a place called Kiryat Ye'arim. And at Kiryat Ye'arim, it's there for some time until King David decides he's going to establish Jerusalem as his capital. And this is really the first time in all of the Jewish tradition that Judaism recognizes that Jerusalem is the place that God promised and took us out of Egypt to get to. This was our final destination. And this is where, this is what God meant when he said, I want you to seek this out. But it still wasn't clear where in Jerusalem it is. And this is where it gets interesting, because nowhere does it tell us where this place is. Where was the place of the Akedah? Where was the place where Isaac was brought up as an offering, which was the place which is the central rock, the rock of creation? This is, we'll save this for another YouTube video, another discussion, another shir. We can explore together what this means. But for now, we're looking for the holiest spot. We're looking for the place where there's sustenance comes through. And we'll leave it at that. But it was hidden. And God in Deuteronomy 12 says, seek it out. I want you to look for it. So King David in 2 Samuel, he says, I'm done. I move into my nice house. I don't think that I should be sleeping in a house made of wood, while God, his Aron, after the Philistines took it, they finally came to Jerusalem. And one night, King David goes to sleep, and he calls to the prophet, and he says to his seer, he says, I feel bad. And this is what Rashi of Solomon Isaac says is actually the first person to fulfill this commandment of to seek a resting place for God, King David. Then, if we jump ahead to 2 Samuel's chapter 24, the last one, or Chronicles 21, same story, just slight variations. It's repeated in Chronicles. But in 2 Samuel's 24, what does it say? The most outrageous story. If you've never heard it, you're in for a good one. But most people know some of it. And this is the story of the revelation of the location of the Holy Temple on the Temple Mount. The picture that's in Hamas terrorists' houses across Gaza, this picture was something we needed to seek out. King David decided he went to God. He went to Nassan Hanavi, and he said, I want to see it. For some reason, Nassan says, the prophet said, it's not going to be you. Your kid, Solomon, he hadn't even met Bathsheba yet. Your kid, Solomon, will be the one who builds it. So let's move into 2 Samuel 24. If I haven't lost you yet, we're examining and looking deep on the origins of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, which is found in so many people's homes as a simon, as a sign of God being on their side. And I want to explain the odd way God reveals it. So what happens is the way it says in Chronicles 12 is the Satan comes to David HaMelech and says, David, I have something I need you to do. I want you to count the Jewish people. And now everybody knows, even a small child knows, that counting people, the Jewish people, is not something we do. We give money, we count the coins. When you count things, you're putting it in a space. We're not going to get into that. But clearly, he was wrong. And Yoav, who was a righteous man, says to David, you sure you want to do it? He said, God will bless you 100-fold. You should have so many Jews. But for some reason, this goes on. And Yoav takes 9 months and 20 days, the amount of time for a baby's conception and to be developed. And after 9 months and 20 days, he returns and he comes to King David and he says, King David, here's the numbers. He gives him the numbers, and David shrieks and says, oh my God. Literally, he calls out to God Hanavi and he says, God, I've sinned. I don't know what got into me. The Satan came into me. I made a mistake. I counted the people. I'm done. And I've sinned. God, please forgive me. He's talking to a real God, not to God. So God says, let me go see. The next morning they wake up and God comes to David HaMelech and says to King David and says, you got 3 options. Either you get 3 years of famine, or you get 3 months of war, or you get 3 days of plague. Okay. And there, David, because you sinned, you've counted the people. You shouldn't have counted the people. And there, David says, you know what? I would prefer to leave this up to God. Let's have a plague. Now, the plague didn't hit him. He said, the plague will be that God will decide who it hits. And therefore, we say every day, every Jew says, I would rather have the outcomes in God's hand than in my hand. And that's the message. So God says, okay, there's plague. The plague begins, and without getting into the details, it was supposed to be for 36 hours, and it ended up being only for 1 hour. Long story short, 70,000 people die. And King David immediately starts getting weak and scared, and he sees the angel of death with his sword in his hand, like it says in the verses in Chronicles 1:12, and he's standing between heaven and earth with his sword up in his hand. And he stops over a spot, which is called a goren. It's called a threshing ground. And this was the threshing ground of Arnon Hayavusi. Sometimes he's called Arvona, sometimes called Arnon. His name, according to the Kabbalists, is Arona, like Aaron, which is the ark with a hay at the end. But regardless, he was a Jebusi, and it's a question. It's debatable whether or not he was a convert or he wasn't a convert. Regardless, the angel of death comes to David and says, David, for you to stop this plague, you must bring an offering, and you must do it on this piece of land. And that was his command. And then David goes to Arnon. Arnon comes, meets him. He says, listen, I want to stop the plague. So I need to buy the piece of land, and I want to offer offerings to God. And Aaron says, oh, well, I want to give you for free, And David said, trust me, I want to pay. And what it says in Chronicles is he gave him 600 gold coins. He collected 50 from each of the 12 tribes, even though there was 13 the Levites didn't give. And he gives 600 gold coins to Arnon. And then the plague stops. The plague stops. So now what's riddling in question, and this question has bothered for me for many years, is how strange. Why, God, would you not, number one, why do you want us to seek it out? Why not just tell us where it is? Number two, even if you're seeking it out, and once David said, I'm sleeping in my tent, I'm sleeping in my house, I'm not sleeping in my house until God also has a house. So he already fulfilled his thing. So why would God reveal it in such a weird way? And why would they have the plague? So I want to try to unpack this. The most common reason given for the plague, even though Rashi says, Lo yodeh alma, in Samuel's, he says he doesn't know why God put into the head of David this idea. But I want to try to offer a possibility, which is according to the Sifri. The Sifri is an ancient Talmudic, midrashic commentator, says the following. He says that you might think that you only need to seek out the place by using an angel or using a prophet. But he said, no, you have to do it yourself. So what does this mean? That the question is why did God decide to reveal to David in such a weird way? The sin of the people at this time, for 369 years, they're in Shiloh. And for 14 years, they're in Nov until King Shaul kills the Kohanim there. And for 44 years, it's in Givon. All this time, nobody ever decided, let's make a proper house. Let's make a real house for this. A crazy, crazy idea. Nobody thought of it. So God says they're deserving of a punishment. But, and here's the thought that came into my head today, and I later found Chassam Sofer and some other commentaries saying very similar things. And here's the bombshell. The location was going to be revealed. And it could have been revealed through seeking. But since the people didn't seek, it had to be revealed by a plague stopping. That the plague stopping in and of itself is a switch from Midas Hadin, from judgment, the judgment of the plague. The plague came because they didn't seek. The Erev Rav died, like it says the Am. The people, 70,000 die, but they die for one reason, because they didn't seek. And then when that judgment happens, then immediately the place itself becomes revealed, and the angel of death is over this place, and through his offering, he's able to turn around the darkest place. The darkest place a Jew could be is not seeking out a place for God to rest in his heart. The darkest place, the place where for 400 plus years the Jews lived in Eretz Yisrael, the Jews, the children of those and the grandchildren of those who were in Egypt who saw God at Mount Sinai. And they did not seek God within the land. And they rested and they said, like it says in Haggai, chapter 1, verse 4, is this the time for you to sit in your homes, all comfortable, and the house is desolate? Haggai was stimulating the people to get up. He says, you're sitting at home in your comfortable house when God's house and God's resting place and the holiest place on the face of the earth has a mosque on it. Here says the Chassam Sofer, the holy Chassam Sofer, the most unbelievable idea. And if he didn't say this, and you could look it up, it's on this week's Parsha. And if he didn't say this and I didn't see it inside, I wouldn't be able to say such words. He says that we know the Pelishtim, and it's not the Palestinians, but it's the same letters and the same sound. Literally, it means the invaders. But when the Pelishtim, when the Jews in the year 369, when the Jews 369 plus the 14 years after they entered, so 369, 379, 383, in the year 383 since entering the land, the Jews decide they're going to fight the Pelishtim. And they make the mistake because the Pelishtim were starting up with them. They make a mistake and they take the Aron. They take the Ark of Covenant with them to war. And then it is in captive. And then what happens? The Pelishtim come in and they break and destroy the Jewish temple made of stone, because in Shiloh it was made of stone. Says the Chassam Sofer, had the Jews not sinned and brought the ark out, and had the Jews been worthy, they would have beat the Pelishtim, and the Mishkan and the place, which was the temporary dwelling, would remain standing until God would reveal the place in Jerusalem, that Temple Mount. And when that would happen, we would have a commandment, says the Chassam Sofer. We would be commanded to destroy Mishkan Shiloh. Can you imagine? There's a mitzvah to destroy a Mishkan Shiloh. Had the Pelishtim not destroyed it, we would have a mitzvah to destroy it, says the Chassam Sofer. Why? L'shichnoi tidusha. We need a place for God to actually rest. We can't have a traveling bama. We can't have a place where we could offer a prayer to God in any place on planet Earth. Says the Chassam Sofer, we have to do this. Says the Ramban, that I saw later, the Ramban says that this was the chet. The chet of Bnei Yisrael was that they did not seek out a resting place for God. Today, when Hamas puts terrorists, they put the picture of Al-Aqsa Mosque, they put the picture where the king of Jordan and the Waqaf control who comes in and who comes out, the nature of the spirituality of our holiest place. I ask you, please, some respect. Whose land is this land? It's the land that was promised to us by Abraham. It was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But it's only our land if we take the land. It's only our land if we have Yerushalayim every day. Chazal say, because of this mitzvah of l'shichnoi tidushu, that you should seek out a resting place. That every day we have to mention Zion. We mention Zion 3 times a day in our prayers. We never stop praying for Zion. We never stop praying for the return to our holiest place. The place where King David paid 600 gold coins from Arnon Hayavusi, the Jubite, I think that's how it said. Hayavusi. And he pays this money and he takes the Goren. And the Goren is a place where you take the wheat and you stomp on the wheat and you remove the good from the bad. It's a mitzvah. Like last week, Parsha, we said, it's a commandment. Last week's portion we read that you stomp on with your feet. Taking the good from the bad is the eternal quest of the Jewish people. But also seeking a resting place, sitting in your house, like Chagai said, and being comfortable. There's a rabbi, a local rabbi, who's very well known, a famous old rabbi. I don't remember his name. I have a question of which one, but he has not slept on a bed since October 7th. He sleeps on the floor. I read a story this week, an article about this lady who's alive today, who's a Holocaust survivor. And after many years of living in Eretz Yisrael in the Holy Land, she was taken by her grandchildren to see Niagara Falls. And they said, Savta, Grandma, isn't this beautiful? Isn't this the greatness of God? The Niagara Falls, the beautiful water rushing over the top and splashing, the power of God. And she looked at it and she said, it's very nice, but it doesn't change anything in me. It doesn't move anything in me. She said, when I look at a pebble or a broken rock in the Holy Land, what I see is my children. The same love I have for my children, that I love every one of them. Yes, sometimes they have defects because I'm seeing them so close. And sometimes we have issues with Eretz Yisrael, but it's our land. It's not Niagara Falls, but it can be Niagara Falls. It can be much more powerful than nature. It could be supernatural. Supernatural, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. The eternity of the Jewish people doesn't lie. We've all returned. It's happened. Like Isaiah says in chapter 54 that we will read this week. Rani Salah Hiloi Nechama. She's completely gone. She's in tears. She's hysterical. And she's inconsolable. Where are my people, she says. How come they all haven't returned? She's waiting. She's waiting for us to return. Sfas Emes says that every Jew who enters Eretz Yisrael brings into Eretz Yisrael Kedusha from Shemayim. That the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, it's Eretz HaTzvi, that it has infinite amount of Kedusha. And the holiness, the Kedusha, the holiness is separation. By us separating and taking the land and taking ownership, we're bringing holiness into the land. And the final days will be when the Jewish people will be a light to the nations. By that it means we will be an inspiration. We will be a teacher. We will be able to influence the Goyim, the non-Jews, not to convert, because at that time it may be too late, but to be a part, and everybody will be a part. And like it says, Amim, Baruch Amim Mitzrayim, blessed are you. At the end of times, God will bless the Egyptians. The Egyptians represent the antithesis of Judaism. But at the end of time, everybody will see their part, their connection, their reason, their part in bringing the Geula. Just like God didn't reveal the location to Abraham when he told him to leave his dwelling place and go to the land, and he calls it the land Asher Eka, the land that I will show you. Had he shown him, he would not be going to the land. If you know where you're going and you're going with your own mind and your own arms and your own legs, then you're not following the path. The path God wants is the path of faith. And that's why God says, don't fear. Don't have fear, but seek out a place. And seek out a place where I can rest, God says. On Shabbos, every Saturday, every Jew has an opportunity to be godlike and rest. And when we rest on Shabbos, 6 days a week, it's hard to be creative like God. But resting, we could rest like God. We can do that. When we rest on Shabbos and we stop talking about things that we talk about during the week, and we begin to focus on godly ideas, on the texts of the Torah, then we're allowing God to find a resting place within our hearts. A famous poet, 19th century poet, wrote, Bilvavi Mishkan Evne. In my heart, I will build a temple. May it be God's will and our will to reunite with this longing, this desire for seeing God resting in this world with the redemption. And the final end game is we all return. It will happen. Every Jew will be in Eretz Yisrael. Guaranteed. This time, no way out. Not 1/5, not 1/50th. Every Jew will end up in Israel. It's just a matter of time. And that's up to us. The Shichnai Tidrashu, may we be zocheh to see the rebuilding of Yerushalayim in Ruchnius, that the land will no longer call out, but we will call out to the land. Have a great Shabbos. Thank you for listening. If this interests you, if this is a topic that you want to hear more about, please leave a comment. I do read the comments. Please leave the comments civil. This is a Orthodox Jewish lecture, but we welcome all colors and all parts of Judaism. And if you're not Jewish, we welcome your comments as well, but please be respectful of our audience. Thank you.